Some people asked me to draw a Stitch, so yeah, let's do that. I start with this dome shape, like a half circle with these rounded corners on the bottom. And the very first thing I do after that is I add his nose. His nose is going to anchor all the other features on his face. I add the eyes, low and wide. And one of the tricks to making Stitch look proper is that the bottom of Stitch's nose is slightly higher on his face than the bottom of Stitch's eye corners. His mouth is as wide as his entire head, and I tend to bow his upper lip upwards just a little bit underneath his nose. I open his mouth, and I'm going to add as many teeth as I can fit. And the next thing I do is I usually circle back and put the highlights in his eyes, and then I fill them in. One of the distinctive features of Stitch is these eyes that are basically one solid pupil. Stitch's lead animator in Florida was named Alex Kuperschmidt, and Alex remarked to me once that he really liked those big, solid eyes because they tended to give Stitch not a lack of expression, but even when Stitch was sitting still, he tended to look a little bit unpredictable and malevolent, even though he was otherwise doing nothing. Now I'm going to add the ears, and another Alex Kuperschmidt refinement was that Alex made Stitch's ears flare outwards. They get a little bit bigger as they move away from his face. And each one will have a little bit of a notch, a little bit of damage. Throw some hair on the top of his head, real loose. Now Stitch's body, I tend to give him this little chest that's forward, and then this arched back and a parallel line for his tummy, this concave tummy. The bottom of his body is just going to be a straight line. Think of him as a big sack of flour with all the flour run down to the bottom. When it comes time to put his arms on, I give him these little tiny shoulders, and then the rest of his arm is really just this big, again, kind of a flour sack shape that hangs low. And sometimes in a quick sketch like this, I'll just put his fingers on the bottom of his arm. I really don't define a hand unless I'm going to do a more detailed drawing of him. His feet are two little hockey pucks placed at the bottom of his body, and then I just throw his little rounded toes onto the fronts of those shapes. And he really doesn't have much of a leg. His leg tends to be just this little, like this afterthought, like you throw this little knee on above his feet, and that's his leg. Sometimes I give him a belly button, which doesn't make any sense, but that's how I draw him.